Imagine sitting at a family dinner table, the same table where you celebrated birthdays as a child, the same table where your grandmother used to tell stories that made everyone laugh until their stomachs hurt, the same table where you carved your name underneath the leg when you were 7 years old and nobody ever found out. You are sitting at that table, but something is wrong. Nobody is looking at you. Your mother is talking to someone else. Your brother hasn't spoken to you in 3 weeks. Your aunt, the one who used to call you her favorite, gets up and moves to the other side of the room when you walk in. And you sit there, confused, hurt, completely alone in a room full of people who share your blood. You look across the table and there they are, the person who did this to you, and they are smiling. Not a loud smile, not an obvious one, just the faintest curl at the corner of their lips. Because they know exactly what they did, and they know that you will never be able to explain it to anyone in a way that makes sense. Because of the weapon they used against you was you. They used your kindness, your sensitivity, your deep, unshakable ability to feel what other people feel. They took the most beautiful thing about you and turned it into the sharpest knife they ever put in your back. Welcome to Silent Deceivers. Today, we are going to talk about one of the most painful, most invisible, and most misunderstood forms of psychological abuse that exists. We are talking about how toxic, manipulative people specifically target empathetic individuals like you and use their own capacity for love and compassion as the blueprint for destroying them from the inside out. We are going to talk about how they turn your own family against you, step by step, slowly, silently, and with absolute precision. This is not a simple story. This is not a story about a villain wearing a mask. This is a story about a person who smiled at you every single day while they were quietly dismantling every relationship you had ever built. Stay with me tonight. By the end of this video, you are going to understand something that may have been confusing you for years, and more importantly, you are going to know what to do about it. Let us start at the very beginning, before any of the manipulation happened, before the lies, before the whisper campaigns and the turned backs and the cold silences. Before any of that, there was a moment, a specific, calculated, deliberate moment when someone looked at you and made a decision. And the decision they made was this: this person feels deeply. This person cares. This person will do anything not to hurt someone they love. This person is perfect. Now here is what you need to understand, and I need you to really let this land before we move forward. They did not see your empathy as a gift. They saw it as a gap in your armor. For most of your life, you probably believed that being a caring, emotionally intelligent person was something to be proud of, and you should be proud of it. Empathy is one of the rarest and most genuinely beautiful qualities a human being can possess. But here is the dark truth that nobody tells you. Empathy, in a world that contains predators, can also be a liability, and toxic people know this. They know it instinctively, the way a shark knows where to find blood in the water. They have spent their entire lives surrounded by people who eventually saw through them and left. They have been abandoned, rejected, and exposed. And every time that happened, they learned something new about what to look for next time. And what they look for is you, the person who gives people the benefit of the doubt, the person who, when someone is crying, doesn't ask whether the tears are real, they just reach out and hold the hand. The person who would rather suffer in silence than make someone else uncomfortable. The person who apologizes even when they did nothing wrong because the thought of conflict feels physically painful. That person, you. Psychologist Dr. Judith Orloff, one of the world's leading experts on empaths, describes highly empathetic people as individuals who absorb the world's joys and sufferings. She explains that empaths feel things at a neurological level that most people do not. Their mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for emotional resonance, fire more intensely than average. This means that when you see someone in pain, you do not just feel sympathy for them. You feel it with them. You feel as they do. And that is extraordinary, but to a manipulator, that is a doorway, because they know that if they can make you feel their pain deeply enough, you will do almost anything to take that pain away. Even things that hurt you, even things that cost you, even things that ultimately destroy you. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us talk about how it begins. Every manipulation story has a beginning, and almost every beginning looks the same. It does not begin with cruelty. It does not begin with red flags screaming in your face. It begins with warmth. It begins with connection. It begins with the single most intoxicating feeling a human being can experience, the feeling of being truly, deeply, completely understood. Psychologists call this phase the idealization stage. In the context of family and social manipulation, it is more accurately described as the grooming phase, and it is breathtaking. Think back to when you first truly connected with this person, whether it was a romantic partner who was welcomed into your family, a new sibling-in-law, a step-parent, a cousin who moved closer, a family friend who became a fixture at every gathering. In the beginning, they were the most wonderful person in any room. They remembered details about your life that no one else noticed. They asked about your childhood in a way that felt genuinely curious, not nosy. They laughed at your jokes, validated your feelings, and seemed to see something in you that you had always wanted someone to see. They made you feel like you had finally found your person, your ally, your safe place. And at some point, and this is the part that matters most, they shared something with you, something painful, something personal. Something that made them look vulnerable. Maybe they cried in front of you about a difficult childhood. Maybe they confided about being misunderstood their entire life. Maybe they told you that people have always wronged them, always taken advantage of them, always left them. And you, with your enormous aching heart, you believed them. Of course you did. Because you are an empath. You do not experience someone else's emotional disclosure as a performance. You experience it as a sacred act of trust. When someone shows you their wound, you do not question whether the wound is real. You reach out and try to heal it. That is your nature. But here is what was actually happening in that moment, beneath the surface of that beautiful, emotional connection. They were studying you. They were mapping your emotional landscape. Every story they told you about being wronged was actually a question in disguise. How do you respond when I present myself as a victim? Every time they cried, they were watching how you reacted. Every time they confided, they were cataloging how much you could hold. Every time they seemed fragile, they were measuring exactly how far your empathy could carry them. This is the grooming phase. And by the time it was over, by the time you had shared your own deepest fears, your family's private dynamics, your own wounds and insecurities, and the relationships that mattered most to you, they had everything they needed. A detailed, intimate map of your world, and a very clear understanding of how to use it against you. The shift does not happen overnight. That is the most important thing to understand about this entire process. If it happened overnight, if a person was warm and wonderful on Monday and a calculating monster by Tuesday, you would see it. Everyone would see it. The game would be over before it started. The shift happened slowly, incrementally, like a temperature change so gradual that you never reach for a jacket until you are already freezing. The first thing you notice is small. Maybe they comment on someone in your family who rubs you the wrong way. A little observation about your sister that seems slightly unkind, but they say it with such a smile, such apparent lightness, that you decide you are overreacting. Maybe they repeat something you said in confidence, not maliciously, just casually in front of someone else, and when you feel a flicker of discomfort, they look at you with such genuine confusion that you convince yourself the problem is your sensitivity, not their behavior. Maybe they start to need you more of your time, more of your emotional energy, more of your presence at the expense of other relationships. And because you are an empath, because your entire identity is built around being there for the people you love, you give it. You give and you give and you give. And with each act of giving, two things are happening simultaneously. First, they are deepening your bond with them, making you feel more responsible for their emotional state, more tied to their well-being, more afraid of what will happen if you withdraw your care. Second, they are using the information you gave them during the grooming phase to very quietly, very carefully, very strategically begin to plant seeds. Seeds of doubt, seeds of confusion, seeds of a story about you that has nothing to do with who you actually are. Your instinct to help, the instinct that made you stay up late listening to them cry, that made you defend them when others questioned them, that made you put their needs before your own again and again and again, that instinct is now being redirected. It is no longer serving your relationships. It is now serving their agenda. And the most devastating part of this shift, you are the last one to notice. Because from the inside, it still feels like love. It still feels like you are doing the right thing. It still feels like the beautiful, connected person they showed you in the beginning is real, and that all you need to do is give a little more, understand a little deeper, be a little more patient, and everything will be okay. But it will not be okay, because while you are looking inward, questioning yourself, they are looking outward, at your family. In 1997, clinical psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freyd introduced one of the most important concepts in the study of psychological manipulation. She called it DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. And once you understand it, once you can see the architecture beneath the chaos, you will never be able to unsee it. Here is how it works. The manipulator does something harmful. They lie, they betray, they cause damage to you, to a relationship, to the truth. It does not matter what the specific action is. What matters is that when you confront them about it, or when the truth begins to surface, they do not apologize, they do not explain, they do not even acknowledge, they deny. That never happened. You are remembering it wrong. I never said that. You are putting words in my mouth. The denial is delivered with complete conviction. Not nervousness, not defensiveness in the way you would expect from someone caught in a lie, but with a calm, steady certainty that makes you feel like you are the one losing your grip on reality. And when the denial does not make you back down, when you hold firm because you know what you experienced, they move to the second phase. They attack. Why are you always so dramatic? This is exactly the problem with you. You can never let anything go. I have done everything for this family, and this is how you treat me. You are paranoid. You are toxic. You are the problem. The attack is designed to do one thing: make you defend yourself. Because the moment you shift from talking about what they did to explaining why you are not the monster they are describing, the subject has changed. You are no longer talking about their behavior. You are now talking about yours. And that is exactly where they want you. Because once you are on the defensive, they execute the third and most devastating phase. They reverse victim and offender. Suddenly, they are the ones who have been wronged. They are the ones who have been unfairly accused. They are the ones who have been suffering in silence, tolerating your behavior, enduring your cruelty, holding this family together despite how difficult you have made it. I have never said a bad word about you to anyone, and you treat me like this. I have always protected you, and you are attacking me. I am not the problem. I am the only one who actually cares about keeping this family together. And here is the terrifying genius of DARVO when it is performed in a family context. They do not just perform it for you. They perform it for the audience. Every conversation where they deny your reality in front of a family member is a data point. Every time they position themselves as the wounded party in front of witnesses, they are writing a chapter in a story about you. A story where you are unstable, where you are the aggressor. You are the one tearing the family apart. And they are the brave, suffering, endlessly patient person holding it all together. Now we need to talk about something that is genuinely one of the most painful things a person can experience. Because up until this point in the story, the manipulation has been relatively abstract, psychological, emotional, but the smear campaign is where it becomes concrete. This is where the information you shared during the grooming phase, those intimate, vulnerable disclosures you made because you trusted this person completely, gets weaponized. Let me paint you a picture. During the grooming phase, you told them about your anxiety. You told them that sometimes your anxiety makes you overreact in arguments, and that it is something you are working on. You told them because you trusted them. You told them because you felt safe with this person. Now, in the smear campaign, your mother is hearing that you have been struggling with serious mental health issues, and that this person is very worried about you. You told them that you and your father had a difficult relationship for a while, a specific argument, a period of estrangement, something you worked through together and healed from. Now, Your aunt is hearing that you have always had a problem respecting your father, and that you recently said something terrible about him, something you never said, something that bears only a passing, distorted resemblance to the real story. You told them that your sister sometimes frustrates you because you told them everything, because that is what you do when you love and trust someone. Now, your sister is hearing a version of that frustration so twisted, so amplified, so stripped of context and compassion, that it sounds like you have been secretly resenting her for years. This is the smear campaign. And what makes it devastating, what makes it almost impossible to fight, is the structure. Each disclosure is made privately, one family member at a time. Your mother does not know what your aunt has been told. Your sister does not know what your father has heard. Each conversation is tailored, calibrated, and delivered with just the right amount of concern, sadness, and reluctant confession. I really did not want to say anything, but I am so worried about them. I have been holding this in for so long, but I feel like you deserve to know. Please do not tell them I told you this, because I am still trying to protect them. But that phrase, "please do not tell them," is not a request for privacy. It is a structural element. It ensures that no one compares notes. It ensures that you never receive the full picture of what is being said about you. It ensures that by the time you start noticing the distance in your family's eyes, the narrative is already so deeply embedded that your attempts to explain yourself look exactly like what you have been accused of: instability, aggression, paranoia, because the manipulator told them this would happen. They told your family they are going to come to you with a very different version of events, and I understand why. I still love them, but please be careful. They inoculated your family against your truth before you even had a chance to speak it. This section is the one I want you to hold most carefully, because this is the part of the architecture that is most likely to make you doubt yourself. By this point in the manipulation, several things have happened. You have been subjected to months, possibly years, of psychological erosion. You have been gaslit until your grip on your own reality is shaky. You have watched relationships that meant everything to you begin to cool without understanding why. You have been manipulated, lied to, and quietly humiliated. And you are exhausted. And eventually, because you are human, and humans have limited their brakes, maybe you raise your voice. Maybe you say something sharp, something unkind, something born from the accumulated weight of all the invisible damage. Maybe you cry in front of a family member in a way that looks unhinged to someone who has not been told the truth of what you have been living through. Maybe you confront the manipulator directly, loudly, in a moment of desperation, and they simply stand there, quietly, calmly, looking at you with an expression of such profound sadness, such patient endurance, such reluctant sorrow, while family members watch. This is the moment they have been building toward. This is the moment they manufactured. Every act of erosion, every whisper, every subtle undermining. It was all designed to bring you to exactly this point. Because now they do not have to say anything. Your family saw it. They saw you lose control. They saw the manipulator stand there with quiet dignity. And regardless of what came before, regardless of the months and years of invisible cruelty that led to this moment, what they witnessed in that single, visible, public moment is now the truth. This is called manufactured reactionary abuse. The toxic person commits invisible, deniable abuse over an extended period. They then create the conditions for you to react in a way that is visible, memorable, and apparently disproportionate. And your reaction, which is, in reality, a completely understandable response to sustained psychological torture, becomes the only data point your family is shown. The effect is devastating. Because now, when you try to explain what happened, when you try to give your family context, when you say, "You do not understand what they have been doing to me all these months," your family thinks of what they saw. And what they saw was you, out of control, and the manipulator standing there, steady and sad. And every word you say in your own defense now reads as an attempt to justify the behavior they witnessed with their own eyes. This is the trap, and it is almost perfectly designed. Almost. In the world of narcissistic abuse, there is a term borrowed from a story you already know: flying monkeys. In The Wizard of Oz, the wicked witch's flying monkeys do her bidding. They carry out her will. They attack on command. They spread her influence across the land. They are not the villain, but they serve the villain. And in real-life manipulation, your family members, the people you grew up with, the people who share your blood and your memories can become flying monkeys, not because they are evil, not because they hate you, but because they have been subjected to a masterfully constructed psychological pressure campaign that makes them believe that siding with the manipulator is not just the easier choice, it is the moral choice. Let us talk about how this happens. A family is a social system, and like all social systems, it operates according to unspoken rules, hierarchies, and pressures. One of the most powerful of these pressures is the pressure to have an opinion when conflict arises. When there is open conflict in a family, neutrality becomes almost impossible. If your mother is on one side and your sibling is on the other, choosing not to choose is itself a choice, and it alienates both parties. The manipulator understands this, and they exploit it with extraordinary precision. What they present to your family members is not a request. It is a test of character. They frame every interaction not as "here is my side of a conflict," but as "a vulnerable person needs your protection, and I am asking you to be the kind of person who provides it." This framing is critical, because it does not ask your family members to be against you. It asks them to be for the manipulator. It asks them to be heroes. And most people, good, loving, well-meaning people, find it very difficult to walk away from the opportunity to be a hero. The manipulator describes their suffering with devastating detail. The sleepless nights, the tears, the endless, exhausting effort to hold things together while you, allegedly, tear them apart. They tell your family members that they have never said a bad word about you, even as they are saying very bad things about you. They tell them that they just want peace, even as they create war. They present themselves as completely without malice, even as every word out of their mouth is a carefully calibrated act of malice. And your family members, who are not psychologists, who have no reason to suspect that this person they have come to know and care about is performing as they believe them. Of course they do, because the performance is extraordinary. This is the part that breaks people, understanding not just that your family was deceived, but why they were so willing to be deceived. Because at some level there is always a part of the betrayed person that asks, why did they not just ask me? Why did they not come to me and say, I heard something about you and I want to know if it is true? Why did they just believe? The answer is uncomfortable, but it is important, because the manipulator did not just offer them a false narrative about you. They offered them something else, something seductive, a role. In the manipulator's version of events, every family member who sides with them gets to be something they want to be. Your mother gets to be the wise, compassionate parent who sees through the drama and protects the real victim. Your brother gets to be the strong, righteous protector standing up to the aggressor. Your aunt gets to be the perceptive one who always knew something was off about you. Each person gets a costume. Each person gets a script. Each person gets a reason to feel good about the choice they are making. This is not a coincidence. The manipulator studies each family member just as carefully as they studied you. They know what your mother values most. They know what role your brother has always played. They know what your aunt's relationship with drama looks like. And they offer each person the version of this story that fits them most perfectly. Meanwhile, the role they have written for you is the only one with no dignity. You are the villain. Or worse, the unstable, pitiable, dangerous thing that needs to be managed. You are not given a hero's costume. You are not offered a role that makes you feel powerful. You are offered nothing, because the entire architecture requires you to be the one person in the story who is not worth listening to. And here is the unbearable irony. The more you try to explain yourself, the more you reach out, the more you defend yourself, the more desperately you try to restore the truth, the more you look like exactly what they said you were. Unstable, aggressive, unable to let things go. The trap tightens with every movement you make inside it. Now let us talk about what happens to you on the inside. Because while all of this is happening around you, while the whisper campaigns are spreading and the alliances are solidifying and the roles are being assigned, you are going through something very difficult to describe, and very difficult for people who have not experienced it to understand. You are experiencing a form of grief that has no name. It is not the grief of death. The people you are losing are still alive. It is not the grief of a fight. There is no specific argument you can point to, no clear moment of rupture you can trace. It is the grief of slow disappearance. The grief of watching people you love, people who know you, people who have always known you, begin to look at you like a stranger. And you do not just grieve the relationships. You grieve your own reality, because the manipulation has been so sustained, so thorough, so complete that you begin to genuinely question yourself. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you do overreact. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe everyone cannot be wrong and only you are right. This is the destination the manipulator has been driving you toward from the very beginning. This is the final product of everything they have done, not just your isolation, your surrender. Because an empathetic person who has been successfully isolated does one of two things. Some of them explode, they become the monster they were accused of being, their pain spilling out in ways that cannot be explained or justified. And some of them disappear. They go quiet. They stop reaching out. They stop attending family events, stop initiating contact, and stop trying to defend themselves. Not because they are guilty, not because they have given up on the truth, but because the cost of every interaction has become so unbearably high that silence begins to feel like survival. And the manipulator watches this withdrawal, this exhausted, heartbroken, silent disappearance, and they tell your family, "See, I told you. I told you they would eventually show their true colors and pull away from the family. I have been trying to hold things together, but there is nothing more I can do." And the story is complete. Your pain has been used as the final chapter of a narrative you never got to read. There is a particular cruelty in what we are about to discuss. Because if you thought the manipulation was contained to the present, to things that are happening now in the current dynamics of your family, you are not fully prepared for this next part. Toxic manipulators do not just operate in the present. They reach back, into the past, into the shared history that you believed was yours, that you believed belonged equally to everyone who lived it, your childhood memories. Family stories that have been told 100 times at dinner tables and holiday gatherings. The inside jokes, the shared references, the shorthand language of a family that has been together for decades. All of it becomes material, all of it becomes ammunition, and the way it is used is both sophisticated and savage. The manipulator takes a memory, a real memory, something that actually happened, and they alter it just slightly, not completely, not in a way that is obviously false, just enough. They take the memory of the argument you had with your mother when you were 16, the one that was painful and complicated, and that you and your mother worked through and healed from years ago, and they describe it to a family member in a way that strips away all the healing. They tell the story of the argument accurately, but they leave out the resolution. They leave out the reconciliation. They describe it as an open wound, as evidence of a pattern of behavior, as a formative data point in the case they are building against you. They take the memory of the time you struggled in school, or the time you went through a difficult period, or the time you made a mistake that everyone in your family knows about, because you are a family and families know these things and they use it. Not to understand you, not to contextualize you, to define you. To suggest that the person you are right now in this conflict is the direct continuation of the worst version of yourself from 20 years ago, that you have never really changed, that the family just never saw it clearly until now. This is an extraordinarily effective technique because it does something very specific to the people who hear it. It recontextualizes. When your aunt hears this framing, she does not just receive new information. She receives a new lens through which to view old information. Suddenly, that argument from when you were 16 doesn't look like a normal adolescent conflict that was resolved. It looks like evidence. It looks like the first chapter of the story that the manipulator is telling. And as the manipulator fills in more chapters, more memories, more incidents, more carefully selected and skillfully distorted moments from the shared history of your family, a portrait emerges. A portrait of a person who has always been this way. A portrait that uses your real life, your real memories, your real family to paint something that has nothing to do with who you actually are. This technique is called collective gaslighting. It does not just make you doubt your present reality. It makes your entire family doubt the shared history that connected you all. Now I want to talk about something that is particularly prevalent in certain communities, certain cultures, certain families. But that exists, in some form, in almost every family that has ever faced this kind of manipulation. The exploitation of family loyalty. In many families, especially in cultures with strong traditions of family unity, in communities where religious or cultural values emphasize loyalty, forgiveness, and keeping peace within the family, there is a deeply ingrained belief. Family first. No matter what. You do not air the family's problems to outsiders. You do not break ranks. You do not let conflict divide what blood has joined. You forgive. You endure. You stay. These are beautiful values. In healthy families, these values create extraordinary resilience, warmth, and connection. But in families where a manipulator is operating, these same values become a cage. Because the manipulator understands the family's value system better than most of its members do. They have studied it carefully. They know which values hold the most weight, and they use those values to shame you into silence. After everything this family has been through, you want to cause more pain. You know what our people say about family loyalty. You know what we were raised to believe. Your grandmother would be heartbroken if she knew you were doing this to the family. At the end of the day, blood is blood. How can you let something like this destroy what we have? Notice what is happening in these statements. The manipulator is not defending their behavior. They are not addressing the truth of what you are saying. They are invoking the family's highest values and using those values to make you feel that pursuing the truth is itself a moral failure. They are saying, the kind of person this family raised would let this go, and your refusal to let it go is proof that you are not that person. In religious families, this can become even more acute. Forgiveness is not optional in our faith. If you cannot forgive, you need to look at yourself. We are supposed to be peacemakers. Who is making peace here and who is causing division? God sees what you are doing to this family. These are not spiritual invitations. They are spiritual weapons. And they work with devastating effectiveness on people who take their faith seriously, on people for whom the idea of failing their family, failing their God, failing the values they were raised with is genuinely one of their greatest fears. The manipulator is not more spiritual than you. They are not more loyal than you. They are no more committed to family unity than you. They are simply more willing to use the things that are sacred to you as tools for your destruction. And the tragedy, the almost incomprehensible tragedy, is that they say these things in the presence of family members who find them deeply moving. Because when your uncle hears someone speak about family loyalty and forgiveness with such apparent conviction, he does not hear manipulation. He hears values. He hears the person in the room who most sounds like the family he was raised in. And he turns to look at you, and what he sees is someone who looks unwilling to forgive. Someone who looks like the enemy of peace. Someone who looks like the problem. In healthy relationships and healthy families, when there is conflict between two people, there is a pathway. The two people talk to each other. They sit down, they listen, they explain, they disagree, they work through it. Or they do not, and the relationship bears the mark of that unresolved conflict. But the conflict is between the two people who are actually in it. In a family where a manipulator is operating, this pathway is systematically closed. Not loudly, not obviously, but closed. Every time you try to have a direct conversation with the manipulator, every time you try to say, I need to talk to you about something, they find a way to reroute the conversation. They become suddenly overwhelmed. They become confused, wounded, and unable to understand what you could be referring to. They turn the conversation into a referendum on your communication style rather than an examination of their behavior. And eventually, inevitably, they draw in a third party, a family member, an ally, a witness, or a mediator. And suddenly, a conversation that should have been between the two of you is a performance for an audience. And in that audience sits the person the manipulator needs to influence next. This is triangulation. The introduction of a third party into what should be a two-person dynamic shifts the power balance. But in family manipulation, triangulation goes far beyond a single conversation. It becomes the primary mode of communication in the family system. Every piece of information about you is now filtered through the manipulator before it reaches your family. Every grievance is reported to the manipulator first, so they can shape the narrative before it reaches you. Every potential alliance is intercepted, assessed, and if necessary, preemptively undermined. Your family stops talking to you about things that concern you. They talk to the manipulator about things that concern you. And by the time anything reaches your ears, it has traveled through so many layers of distortion that it bears no resemblance to the original truth. Direct communication has been replaced by a system of filtered, toxic whispers. And in that system, the manipulator is the switchboard operator. Every call goes through them. Every message is received, assessed, and forwarded or not at their discretion. And you, standing outside the system, trying to reconnect, trying to make yourself understood, you keep reaching out and finding that your calls are not getting through. Not because your family does not love you, but because the lines have been quietly cut. And you do not even know it yet. We have spent a long time in the dark tonight. And I need you to know that I made a deliberate choice to stay there, to walk through every detail, every mechanism, every invisible cruelty, because I believe that understanding is the beginning of power. You cannot reclaim a narrative you do not understand. You cannot dismantle a trap you cannot see. And so we looked at it, all of it, the grooming, the DARVO, the smear campaign, the flying monkeys, the weaponized memories, the exploitation of your culture, your faith, your values, your love. We looked at it in the light because it deserves to be seen. And now we talk about what comes next. And the very first thing I need to say before we talk about strategies or tools or steps is this: you are not crazy. I know there are days when you question your own perception so deeply that you are not sure what is real anymore. I know there are moments when the weight of everyone's misunderstanding feels so heavy that you start to wonder if they are right. I know that there is a voice, a quiet, exhausted, defeated little voice that sometimes whispers, maybe it really is me. And I need you to hear me when I say, it is not you. What you experienced is real. What was done to you has a name. It has a documented architecture. It has been studied and described by psychologists and researchers who spent their careers trying to understand exactly what you have lived through. You are not the first person to sit in a room full of family and feel completely alone. You are not the first person to be turned into a villain by someone who depended on your goodness to do it. You are not broken. You are not unstable. You are not the person they described. You are a person who loved deeply, trusted completely, and was deliberately targeted because of it. And surviving that, still being here, still trying to understand, still looking for a way forward that is not weakness. That is one of the most extraordinary forms of strength a human being can demonstrate. And now, it is time to use that strength differently. It is time to stop spending it on the manipulator's narrative and start spending it on yours. The word victim is complicated. In clinical context, it is accurate. If you have experienced sustained psychological manipulation and abuse, you are technically a victim of that abuse. But as an identity, as a lens through which you see yourself, the word can become a trap of its own. Not because what was done to you was not real, but because the moment you accept victim as your permanent identity, you hand the final piece of your story to the person who has been writing it without your consent. The transition from victim to narrator is not about denying what happened. It is about deciding who gets to describe it. And the answer from this point forward is you. This transition does not happen in a single moment of revelation. It is a process, a slow, sometimes painful, often nonlinear process of reclaiming your own perspective. And it begins with documentation. I know that might sound clinical, almost cold, given the emotional territory we have been traversing tonight. But documentation is an act of self-respect. When you write down what you experienced, the specific incidents, the specific words, the specific moments when reality was distorted, you are doing something powerful. You are creating a record that exists outside your own memory. You are creating a reference point that the manipulator cannot reach. They can gaslight you in conversation. They can deny things in front of witnesses. They can distort your memory through repeated false narration, but they cannot reach into your journal and change what you wrote. Documentation is the first act of reclaiming your narrative because it says, I know what I experienced, I have written it down, and I trust my own account of my own life. The second part of this transition is understanding that you do not need to convince everyone. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for an empathetic person to learn. Your instinct, the same instinct that made you vulnerable in the first place, is to be understood, to be believed, to have your truth recognized by the people you love. And that desire is completely human and completely valid. But chasing universal validation from a family that has been deeply infiltrated by a skilled manipulator is a pursuit that will cost you more than it can ever return. You will exhaust yourself. You will come across as desperate, unhinged, and unable to move on, and you will give the manipulator exactly the footage they need. The goal is not to convince everyone. The goal is to know your own truth so completely, so deeply, so unshakably that their failure to believe it stops having the power to erase it. That is the work, and it is hard work, but it is the only work that actually frees you. Let us talk about something practical, because understanding what happened to you is essential, but eventually understanding has to become action. And one of the most important actions you can take, and one of the most difficult, is changing the way you engage with the toxic person and the family system they have compromised. The first strategy is called gray rock. The term comes from a simple metaphor. If you want to avoid being targeted, become as uninteresting as a gray rock. Gray rock is a method of protecting yourself while remaining in proximity to a manipulative person. It involves reducing the amount of emotional material you provide them with. No dramatic reactions, no passionate defenses, no intimate disclosures, no emotional vulnerability, brief, neutral, boring. When they say something designed to provoke you and you will respond with the emotional equivalent of a shrug. Interesting. I hear you. Okay. You give them nothing to work with. Remember, their power over you depends on your emotional reactivity. Your emotions are their raw material. When you become gray rock, you remove the supply. This is extraordinarily difficult for empathetic people, because gray rock requires you to suppress the very thing that defines you, your emotional depth, your expressiveness, your authentic engagement with the world. It will feel fake. It will feel cold. It will feel like you are becoming someone you do not want to be. But here is the crucial distinction. Gray rock is not permanent. It is not who you are. It is a temporary protective posture, a strategy for a specific high-danger environment. The same way you would wear protective gear in a hazardous situation. You would not wear it forever, but in that specific environment it keeps you safe. The second strategy is low contact. Low contact does mean no contact, though for some people in some situations, no contact is ultimately the healthiest choice. Low contact means reducing the frequency, depth, and emotional investment of your interactions with the toxic person and with family members who have been significantly compromised by their influence. You attend fewer events. You keep conversations shorter. You stop volunteering information. You stop trying to repair relationships that the manipulator is actively working to destroy. And you redirect that energy, the energy you would have spent fighting a battle that cannot be won on the manipulator's terms, toward something else, toward yourself, toward safe people, toward healing. Now, the guilt, because I would be doing you a profound disservice if I talked about gray rock and low contact without talking about the guilt that accompanies them. The guilt is real. The guilt is heavy, and for an empathetic person, the guilt can be almost physically painful. Because every time you implement a boundary, every time you decline an invitation, every time you give a short answer instead of a long one, every time you choose your own peace over someone else's comfort, the voice inside says, you are abandoning them. You are being selfish. You are causing harm. You are the person they said you were. And the reason that voice is so loud and so persistent is that the manipulator put it there. They spent months, possibly years, training you to feel responsible for the emotional state of everyone around you. They constructed a version of you that could not say no without guilt, could not withdraw without shame, and could not prioritize your own well-being without feeling like a failure. The guilt is not a moral signal. It is a conditioned response. It is what happens when a person who was taught that their worth depends on their availability starts trying to permit themselves to exist without being available. The guilt will come. Let it come. Feel it. Acknowledge it. And then gently, firmly, with all the self-compassion you have spent so long giving to everyone else, do the thing anyway. Protect yourself anyway. Choose peace anyway. Not because the guilt is wrong, but because the guilt in this case is not telling you the truth. There's a grief that comes with this process that I want to honor before we close tonight. Because everything we have talked about in this video, the gray rock, the low contact, the reclaiming of your narrative, all of it assumes a willingness to let go. And letting go of family, even a family that has been compromised, even family members who have chosen a manipulator's version of you over the real one, hurts in a way that is genuinely unlike any other kind of pain. It is a specific, ancient, visceral ache, because family is not just people. Family is identity. Family is belonging. Family is the place where your story began, and the people who know the context of your entire existence, and the voices that shape the voice inside your own head. When you lose that even partially, even temporarily, something fundamental shifts. And I will not tell you that this grief is not real, or that it passes quickly, or that everything happens for a reason, or any of the other comfortable things that people say when they do not know what to do with someone else's pain. It is real. It will not pass quickly, and no reason makes it stop hurting. But I will tell you something else. The capacity to grieve deeply, the capacity to feel this kind of loss with this kind of intensity, is not a flaw. It is the same capacity that made you a target in the first place. Your enormous, aching, relentless ability to love. And that capacity does not disappear just because the people it was directed toward have been temporarily or permanently lost. It is still there. It is still yours. And there are people in this world, people you may not have met yet, people who may be at the edges of your life right now, quiet and patient and waiting to be let in, who will receive that love the way it was meant to be received. Not as a vulnerability to exploit, not as a resource to drain, but it has always been an extraordinary gift. These people are your chosen family, and chosen family is not a consolation prize. It is not what you settle for when blood ties fail. Chosen family people who love you without agenda, who know your whole story and choose you anyway, who see your sensitivity and call it beautiful rather than exploiting it as a weakness, is one of the most profound forms of human connection that exists. It is not a replacement for what you lost. Nothing replaces it, but it is something real, something yours, something that the manipulator cannot touch, because they were not there when it was built. They did not lay the foundation. They do not have the key. And in the architecture of your chosen family built on honesty and mutual care and freely given trust, there is no gap in the armor for them to slip through. I want to close tonight with something that I have been thinking about throughout this entire conversation. Something that I think gets lost when we talk about manipulation and abuse and betrayal, because we talk a lot about what was taken. And what was taken is real, and it deserves to be named and grieved and honored. But there is something that was not taken, something that could not be taken, no matter how sophisticated the strategy, no matter how thorough the isolation, no matter how complete the family's conversion. There is something that survived. Here you are, after everything, asking questions, seeking understanding, still trying to make sense of the world with enough honesty to sit with painful truths rather than running from them. Still empathetic enough to have found your way to a video called How Toxic People Use Your Empathy to Turn Your Own Family Against You. Not because you are looking to be angry, not because you are building a case against someone, but because you are trying to understand. Because of understanding the connection truth, these things still matter to you. They did not take that. They could not. And that instinct toward understanding, toward connection, toward truth is the thing that is going to save you. Not because it makes you invulnerable. We have spent this entire video establishing that empathy, in the presence of predators, can be a vulnerability. But outside that presence, in the world that exists beyond the toxic person and their compromised audience, Your empathy is not a vulnerability. It is a superpower. It is the thing that will help you read people more accurately going forward. It is the thing that will help you recognize the difference between genuine vulnerability and performed vulnerability. It is the thing that will make you an extraordinary friend, an extraordinary partner, an extraordinary parent, and an extraordinary human being to the people who deserve it, to the people who have earned it, to the people who will hold it with the care it deserves. The manipulator thought they were breaking you. They thought that by using your empathy against you, they were destroying the very thing that made you worth knowing. But they did not understand the nature of what they were working with. Empathy is not fragile. It bends. God, it bends. It bends under enough weight that sometimes it touches the ground. But it does not break. It does not break. And neither did you. If you are watching this tonight and you are still in the middle of it, if the family dinner table is still happening, if the turned backs are still fresh, if the manipulator is still operating at full strength, and you are still surrounded by the consequences of what they have done, I want to speak directly to you. I know this feels like it will never end. I know the isolation feels total and permanent. I know there are days when the weight of being misunderstood by the people you love most feels like it might actually crush you. I know that the question, "How did this happen to me?" loops through your mind at 3 a.m. when the world is quiet and the pain is loudest. And I know that there are people in your life who, right now, because of what they have been told and because of the performance they have witnessed, genuinely believe that you are the problem. That knowledge is one of the most excruciating things a human being can carry. But here is what I also know. The truth has a particular quality that makes it different from a lie. The truth does not require maintenance. A lie requires constant management. It requires remembering what was said to whom. It requires continuous performance. It requires keeping people separate enough that they never compare notes. It requires the ongoing cooperation of a person who is fundamentally exhausted by the work of sustaining a false reality. The truth simply exists. It does not need to be maintained. It does not need to be performed. It waits. And the manipulator, no matter how skilled, no matter how thorough, no matter how complete their architecture, is always working against time. Because people talk. Eventually, people always talk. Eventually, the stories that were meant to stay separate find their way to each other. Eventually, someone asks a question that should have been asked earlier. Eventually, the performance cracks just slightly, just for a moment, but in a way that someone catches. And when that happens, when even one person in your family pauses and thinks, "Wait, something about this doesn't quite add up," the architecture begins to crumble, not all at once, not dramatically, but surely, because it was built on something false, and you were built on something true. And in the long run, in the real full-length run of a human life, truth has a much better record than performance. Hold on. There is an old idea that runs through many cultures, many traditions, many ways of understanding what it means to be human. The idea that the things we carry, the things that sometimes feel like our heaviest burdens, are also our most powerful gifts. The wound and the gift in the same place. Your empathy made you a target. That is true. Your sensitivity, your depth, your instinct to feel what others feel and reach toward their pain, that is what they saw. That is what they used. But here is what they never understood. The same depth that made you susceptible to their manipulation is the same depth that allowed you to survive it. Because surviving this kind of betrayal, surviving the weaponization of your own love, requires a kind of profound internal anchoring that most people never have to develop. It requires you to know yourself so deeply that even when everyone around you is saying you are someone else, you know who you are. It requires you to hold your own truth even when you are standing alone in a room full of people who have been taught to doubt it. It requires extraordinary psychological strength. And you built that strength, not because you wanted to, not because it was a choice, but because you had no other option. And that strength, that hard one, fire-forged, surviving the unsurvivable strength, is yours now, forever. No one can take it. No campaign can erase it. No family gathering where you are conspicuously absent can diminish it. No whisper can undo it. You survived something that was specifically designed to destroy you, and you did it with your empathy intact. That is nothing. That is not even close to nothing. That is everything. Your empathy was never the problem. It was never a weakness. It was never the flaw in your character that a predator found and exploited. It was the most extraordinary thing about you, and it was simply placed for a time in the wrong hands. Take it back. Take all of it back. Every ounce of compassion you poured into a person who turned it into a weapon. Every hour of care you gave to someone who cataloged it as intelligence. Every tear you cried in good faith over wounds that were manufactured to control you. Take it back. And give it slowly, carefully, wisely, with eyes wide open to the world that actually deserves it, to the people who will hold it with reverence, to the strangers who are hurting in ways that are real, to the children who need to see what genuine love looks like, to the friends who have been waiting patiently at the edges of your collapsed world, to yourself most of all. Because if there is one thing that you have given endlessly, selflessly, sometimes devastatingly, without giving enough of it to the person who needed it most, it is care. Care for yourself. Permission to exist without earning it. Permission to be hurt without performing your pain for an audience. Permission to grieve what you lost without being told your grief is further evidence of your instability. Permission to say, what was done to me was wrong. I did not deserve it, and I am going to be okay. If this video resonated with you tonight, if something in what we talked about sounded like your life, like your family, like the thing you have been trying to explain to people who do not have the language for it, I want you to know something. You are not alone. More people are watching this right now who know exactly what you have lived through than you can imagine. People sitting in their cars in parking lots, listening in the dark, finally hearing someone describe something they thought no one else could understand. People lying in bed at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, finding words for a pain that has been wordless for years. People who are still in the middle of it. People who are finally on the other side. People who are somewhere in between trying to figure out which way to walk. You are all here, together, in this strange, digital, faceless, real community of people who felt too deeply, trusted too completely, and paid a price for it that they never should have had to pay. This channel exists for you. If you are new here, welcome. Genuinely. This is a place where the stories that do not get told, where the dynamics that are too complex and too painful to explain in a single conversation get the full examination they deserve. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we have so much more to talk about. And I promise you, every single conversation is going to be worth your time. If you have been watching for a while, thank you. Your continued presence here means something real to me. And if there is someone in your life right now who you think needs to hear this, who is sitting in that confusion, that isolation, that exhausted and bewildered pain of being turned into a villain by someone they trusted, share this with them. Not with a caption, not with an explanation, just send it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone who has lost their narrative is to say, someone else already told your story, and it sounds like yours, and you were not the problem. Take care of yourselves. Watch your backs, trust carefully, and remember the fact that you feel deeply is not the tragedy of your story. It is the most important thing about you.